Bon dia. Good morning. I will use English since many of you are English or English speaking. Well, thank you, Iconic Houses. Thank you, La Pedrera, for organizing. Thank you for bringing us all together. And as usual, I find it very hard to keep to the point, and I like to make rather longish introductions. So I will start with sort of the origin of the concept of historical monument, national heritage, which comes from the French Revolution. At the time when the new state found that they had to deal with a lot of heritage from the church, from the emigrated people, from the crown, they started to write laws to preserve that heritage, all those monuments. And in 1819, we find the first budget dedicated to the monuments in France. At the same time, also, we have the figure of Baron Taylor, who started, he's a magnificent man. He came also to Spain. He was a great lover of architecture, of monuments, and he started a huge project during a very quite a long years, this voyage pittoresque dans l'ancienne France, which is a first inventory of cultural heritage in France with very good illustrations, very romantic, of course, at the time. So this is one of the first sort of efforts to document the past. At the same time, also, the figure of the inspecteur des monuments historiques is created in France, and Prosper Mérimée was the second one. He was a very hard-working man, traveling all around France, and also organizing the first photo campaign in 1851. The Mission Héliographique. He commissioned five pioneer photographers at the time when negatives were invented, and it is a fascinating adventure that they did, going all around France in a very systematic way. Only one of them failed to do his job, and Normandy was left out, but still there is a whole lot of collection of extraordinary photographs of high quality. Many of them were sort of paper negatives and done in very difficult conditions because they had to be developed within the same day, and everything done very quickly. So, and we have images that show us the change of the city, like Carcassonne, before and after Viollet-le-Duc's intervention. So this was more or less the starting point of cultural heritage conservation and protection, and other countries followed. Spain was not far. We had, for example, Pons with his Viaje de España, already at the end of the 18th century, not illustrated, but anyway, a graphic, a sort of an inventory of cultural heritage. And of course, all this is about the state, but there were other societies, other people that were interested in the past, in these romantic times. Of course, sort of the great figures like Shakespeare attracted the attention of the people. And the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust was one of the first house museums to be organized. And not only, I mean, it continues, and they have been buying all different buildings related with Shakespeare, not only his birthplace, but also the house of his granddaughter, and the site of New Place, which was where the house that Shakespeare was living for quite a few years, but that was demolished later on. So we have here this series of buildings that have been bought, restored, and they have kept this the feeling of the time and all the reconstructing not only the architecture but also the use and the lifestyle in the place. So this is one of the sort of original movements of this sort of interest for houses, and always it has been related in those first times with the character of singular people, like of course Poe, who is in the States, was also very much object of attention, and the house that he lived shortly before he died was preserved already at the beginning of the 20th century and kept like this. In Europe, in the Netherlands, Rembrandt is another of the great figures, and of course that has attracted the attention of his living quarters. Again, always the problem is sort of it is in fact recreations of an imagined disposition, because the originals have been lost. In Spain, we had also the figure of El Marqués de la Vega Inclán, who at the beginning of the 20th century, he sort of promoted the houses of three houses of two of sort of icons of Spanish culture, like El Greco, the Casa del Greco, which was built from scratch, but according to an imaginary building. Then the Casa Cervantes, which it was the house where Cervantes lived for 2-3 years, right at the time when he was publishing El Quijote. It is the third house, the one that he was occupying. The neighboring houses were bought by, with the help of King Alfonso XIII and Archer Milton Huntington, who was the founder of the Hispanic Society in New York. The house had been identified already in the mid-19th century, but had not been turned into a museum, and that didn't happen until 1948, with an invented interior according to the documentation of the times. Other buildings related with Cervantes are totally done from scratch. There is this so-called Cervantes birthplace, which is a construction from scratch in 1956, and Cervantes' death place was demolished in 1833, even though there was some attempts to preserve it. And the third intervention of Marqués de la Vega Inclán was the Museo Romántico in Madrid. It is not an actual house that was lived in. It was a great part of his collection that was put together more or less in the style of a house, but it has a great deal of objects, and it is one of the most interesting places for that style in Madrid and Spain. Zuloaga, as a painter, was also fascinated by the figure of Goya, and he was the one involved in the sort of identification and buying the house where Goya was born, which was given to the state, but it's passed through different sort of misfortunes. The building, it was sacked during the war. Then there was a first restoration, and finally become more or less a museum with a invented interior as well. And the the most important house of Goya, of course, was La Quinta del Sordo, where he painted the black paintings. And that was standing still at the beginning of the 20th century, but unfortunately that was also demolished in 1909 when this photograph was published. So it's always these great figures that attract the attention and that cause these houses to be preserved, and trying to preserve the memory of the figure, but it's usually that personality that is in the aim of the whole project. In Catalonia, we have some early examples in the middle of the 19th century of sort of houses like Can Papiol in Vilanova la Geltrú, which preserves this 19th century romantic style. It's a well-preserved building, and some of the local figures like Mossèn Cinto i Verdaguer, a priest, one of the great poets of Catalonia. His birthplace is preserved, and also the house where he died, with the original furniture, and even sort of the desk where he was writing in his last days, where the doctors waited to attend him, and even his deathbed. So we have these great figures that are attracting the attention through the buildings that they live. And of course, Gaudí is undoubtedly one of the key people in Catalonia and in Spain. And already when he was alive, his work was attracting attention, and we have in La Vanguardia in 1890, they publish two central pages dedicated to the house that Güell had just built for himself, and with illustrations engraved to go with it. Of course, one of the other attempts to create this center of interest around the figure of Gaudí is at Parc Güell, with this so-called Casa Gaudí. It's a house where Gaudí lived, but it was not his work, even though it was signed, but it was the project by this Francesc Berenguer i Mestres, who was not an architect, but he was also a friend of Gaudí, and this house where the great architect lived for some years. So this is one of these early examples of house museums which have always languished in the cultural life of the city. Then, at around in the 80s, there started an interest in Gaudí in Japanese circles. There's various people that were attracted by the figure of Gaudí and started to produce documentaries and write about Gaudí, and that started an interest. Later on, others others came also to write about Barcelona, like Robert Hughes, and this helped create an attraction to the city. This, of course, is, I'm going a bit further on, because I have to go back to one of the key moments in the history of Barcelona, which was the designation as the Olympic site for the 1992 Games. So this is an important moment for architecture, for the city of Barcelona, It was sort of the force behind a renovation of the city. There was a lot of building going on, and many of the structures that we are using now are thanks to that project. But it also had an impact on architecture and houses as well. So Barcelona was jubilant, and in this October of '86, and a few weeks later, there was also another announcement that in the mayor of Barcelona sort of initiated a whole project to clean the city. The city had been it was a grey city, and they wanted to bring the colors back. And Barcelona, posa't guapa, Barcelona, get beautiful, Barcelona, shape up. That was sort of a very powerful impulse, and in the next years, a lot of houses were renovated, especially in facades. So we're still in '86, and then again, at the eve of the Christmas Eve of that year, Caixa Catalunya sort of made also the front page by announcing that they were interested in buying Casa Milà, La Pedrera. It was sort of an impact. I mean, it's the savings bank was going to spend almost 1,000 million pesetas, which was a lot of money at the time. 6 million euro now, it doesn't seem that much. And of course, I mean, the building was deteriorated. It had to be restored, and already there was the plan for sort of exhibitions, for lectures, and also a library. So this was a moment also in which Sagrada Familia still was struggling to get the works done. Every year there was a collects of money. People would go around the city asking for money for Sagrada Familia, and it seemed that it would never was going to be ended. It was impossible. So it was a time where sort of all these kind of projects did not have a great impulse. And then still another sort of news made the front lines, and that was that the owners of Casa Amatller were trying to sell it to some Japanese banks for 10,000 million pesetas, so 60 million euros, and that is just 3 years after the Pedrera operation. It was apparently it was in relation with sort of some banking intentions of the owner and some people in the administration, and it was using the money that they were thinking of getting in that sale, that they would be sort of financing this operation. They tried to get into one bank, then into a leasing consortium, but things didn't look so easy. But still, the amounts were getting higher and higher. The figures were climbing, and we get to this 13,000 million pesetas, 83 million euros, that was being sort of talked about. Of course, there were doubts that the price would be sort of really sort of converted. So there were people that were saying that the house would was not worth more than 4 or 5,000 millions, except instead of the 13,000. So this was getting difficult for Enric Bernat, who was the sort of controlling the whole thing. Sorry, I thought it was silenced. And even Sotheby's sort of came into play. They were going to sort of make a public sale, and with 3 important Japanese companies that were apparently sort of going to put a bid. But finally, Iberia Seguros, which was the company owner of the building, sort of gave up the project of the bank. At that time also, El Capricho had been bought, and there is an interesting line there that was also suggested at the time of the Batlló operation, and it says that there had been other offers for El Capricho, but they of Japanese groups, but they finally did not apply because they would not be able to take it apart and take it over to Japan. Because of the laws. So, and that was an argument that circulated also in relationship with La Pedrera. With La Pedrera, with Casa Amatller. So, in the end, it was a failed operation, and in '92, there is references that it has been a year since it was put on sale, and there has been no single offer presented there. So it was the operation was finished, and finally in 1994, Iberia Seguros, which was the owner of the house, sold it to Chupa Chups, which was the family company of Bernat. Chupa Chups was a sort of a lollipop company, and he made a fortune with that. And instead of those 85 million euros, they sold it for 21 million euros. I mean, of course, all these figures are from the press. I don't know if they are totally correct, but anyway, it gives an idea, and also that the house in their accounts was valued at 2.4 million euros. But anyway, all this in order to state that at that time there were enormous figures going around the city in relation with these monuments, with these iconic houses. And in between, Caixa Catalunya had been working in the restoration, and as Marga told us, there was a first opening of the auditorium and of the place for social activities, and also the exhibitions. And they started with the restoration of the attic, where Barba Corsini had built these apartments. They were a very it was an interesting adaptation to the space, and it does seem a pity that they were all done away with, because at least it would have been nice to have at least one example. But still, with all this going on, finally the attic was opened up, and the terrace was also finished, and the building sort of got into sort of full speed in their social and cultural activities. Of course, I mean, the restoration had been very important as well, and there was sort of the expectations were to get a lot of people, something like 400,000 visitors a year, and the figures have been proved really sort of too low. I mean, they have been overdone. At the same time, back to Casa Amatller, they were trying to have some, give some occupation to, or use to the house, and but in a different way. It was the house was going to be rented out for events, even it says as a provisional discotheque if the client so asked. So it is a totally different outlook, sort of very sort of for elite groups of people to use that. There was difficulties getting the licenses, but eventually they managed to do so. And at the same time, still another city project that was the root of modernism, trying to tie and to link the different houses. That was sort of, it started in the year 97, and finally on June 27th, it was officially opened, this modernist route, which is still running and contributing to make a group visit of the most important landmarks of the time. And Casa Amatller was having a sort of a very sort of his the business was going well with Casa Amatller, and it became sort of the place where to have marriages and feasts and presentations, etc. And they had all sorts of services. They offered the decoration, coordination of the celebrations, all music to go with it, and the people. So, and on the other hand, Pedrera was trying to recover that idea of the building as it was with this interior of the period of Art Nouveau. And again, another important year, the Gaudi year, that was sort of basic as well in another change at Casa Amatller, which opened to the public, to the general visit, and it originated long queues, and it is still producing this. So all this has been more or less in this great change of Barcelona as a tourist attraction city, with important monuments that are being have become icons in the visits of these masses of people. So it is, of course, sometimes questioned, but again, we have other models as well. We have Dali and Gala, who were living in Púbol and in Portlligat, and of course, I mean, this is again another case. I mean, they died, and the buildings passed so intact to the state, and they were frozen in time, and now they are open to the public visit, but of course in very special conditions. I mean, it's very fragile interiors, and still preserving all this sublime magic air that the painter used there. Again, another such example as well is Casa Rafael Masó, which we will have Jordi speak us about. So all this to tell you that there are other needs for other types of visit. And for example, in Casa Amatller, we have stories to tell. And the grandfather of Antonio Amatller started making chocolate in the 18th century in the walled-in city. His two sons lived in the city that was beginning to be transformed by industry, and the grandson, Antonio Amatller, saw this broadening of the city, opening up, making space for all the workers that were needed in his big industry that he built. He was using also posters and publicity to promote the sale of his chocolate, and had local artists occupied. But he had also other interests. He was an amateur photographer. He was traveling around. He was one of the first tourists with a camera, and he was co-founder of a Spanish Society of Photography with Pau Huart. He was in touch with the amateur photographers of New York, of the Belgian Society of Photography, and he traveled also around the Mediterranean, for example, shortly before he died, along the Nile up to Khartoum. And not only this, Antonio Amatller was also a collector of Roman glass. He started in 1894 by buying a collection, and together with a priest, Mossèn Gudiol, he sort of continued to enlarge this collection of some quite extraordinary pieces, some as old as the 14th century BC. So we have 3,500 years of the history of glass in the house. Like this is the piece that he bought in Egypt, or like this big Roman piece. So Antonio Amatller was the man who bought a house in Paseo de Gracia. He wanted to live also in Paseo de Gracia, but he wanted a different architecture. And he asked Puig Cadafalch to redo the facade. And in those years, between 1898 and 1900, the city started to be transformed. The Cerdà design suddenly saw individual buildings springing up like mushrooms or trees, going higher than the 22 meters that was the original limit, and starting to put individual elements in this very social, very uniform city. And so the block of houses, the apple of discord, is essentially what the people from Barcelona were thinking of. I mean, the three architects who wanted to be the most beautiful, and they were fighting for this manzana. So this is the house that Antonio Amatller had built, a house that speaks of him as well. There is an allegory of industry. There is dividers, a hammer, and some rabbits that are melting the iron, and monkeys that are forging it. He was, as I said, also an amateur photographer, an artist. So you have a book and a camera in the coat of arms, together with some donkeys dressed up as in Cervantes' time, writing, and dog photographers with the tripod and without a shutter, so just exposing by opening the lens. And finally, collecting. He had a Roman glass, so in the coat of arms you have pieces of glass and some frogs that are blowing glass, and some pigs that are turning pottery. So this is, in fact, an allegorical portrait of Antonio Amatller. He is a magnificent example of that illustrated bourgeoisie who had money but had other interests, and he and the likes of him were the people that put the money on the table for Art Nouveau architecture to be built. An architecture that was, according to Puig i Cadafalch's idea, an architecture that had to rememorate that glorious past of Catalonia as a power in the Mediterranean, and this is why this eclectic style, but still a house that had to have a photo studio on the rooftop, and this is the reason for the stepped gable to integrate that structure into the pre-existing building. Puig i Cadafalch, it's an architecture that changed the city, the pre-existing Eixample, in a radical way. It is also the work of a designer and interiorist. He was doing the drawings, the watercolors for all the different elements of the architecture. But still, of course, I mean, he was only working on paper. He needed people to do that. And we are fortunate also in Casa Amatller in having information about the 50-odd craftsmen and artists that participated. We have contracts, we have bills, we have receipts, and so we can, in the house, we can give credit to the people that made Art Nouveau with their hands. I mean, which people are usually forgotten about, and only the main architects are given the credit. And of course, I mean, they were using good materials, they were very able people, so it was expensive. And it was thanks to this growth of the Catalan economy linked to the Industrial Revolution, and the industry of the Amatller chocolate is an example of that growth. So it would not have been possible to have this marvelous architecture without these people that were really in at the peak also of production. But anyway, this is only a part, and there are other projects going around. I mean, we want to tell stories, and Casa Singulars will tell, and also one of the newest additions will be Casa Vicens. And of course, it is, by this, what I want to say is that it is important that the houses are important, but the group is also important. Each house is only part of the story, and it is only with the linking of the different houses that we will construct. The houses are pieces of a puzzle, and we want the whole image. And for that, I think we have to thank Iconic Houses for getting us all together. Thank you.